Welcome back, everyone, to the channel. Today, we are standing at the absolute precipice of a massive paradigm-shifting conversation in the world of international hoops, one that cuts straight to the beating heart of Philippine basketball, dissects the intricate chess match of global scouting, and maps out the perilous, high-stakes journey of our nation's most watched, most scrutinized, and most deeply beloved basketball prodigy. If you are a fan of Gilas Pilipinas, if you have ever lost sleep watching international tournaments, tracking box scores from across the globe, or analyzing grainy practice footage hoping to see a glimpse of the future, then I need you to sit down, turn off all your distractions, and lock in with me right now. What we are about to unpack today is not just a standard news update. It is not a quick rumor mill rundown or a simple reaction to a viral clip. We are diving into a multi-layered, deeply complex, and historically significant intersection of events that will fundamentally alter how we view the construction of our national team, how we understand the unvarnished reality of American basketball evaluation, and how we project the actual, tangible future of the one and only Kai Sotto. The news that has just broken across the wire and ignited the timelines of every single basketball analyst, insider, and passionate fan from Manila to the United States and beyond, centers around three absolute pillars of our basketball consciousness. First, we finally, truly have an answer to the desperate, agonizing, decade-long search for the additional Gilas Pilipinas shooter, a revelation that could completely unlock our offensive ceiling on the world stage and solve the spacing nightmares that have haunted us in countless heartbreaking FIBA campaigns. Second, in a rare, unfiltered, and highly critical moment of transparency, a prominent, deeply respected United States NCAA Division I team director has stepped out of the shadows to deliver a stark, unvarnished, and perhaps incredibly tough-to-swallow piece of direct advice for Kai Sotto regarding his physical development, his mental approach, and what the highest levels of basketball truly demand from a 7'3" big man in the modern era. And third, breaking down the massive implications of a highly guarded, fiercely debated scouting report that narrows down the absolute best, most optimal developmental pathways for Kai, explicitly outlining the three specific professional leagues that are uniquely positioned to either make or break his ultimate dream of stepping onto an NBA floor. To truly understand the gravity of what we are discussing today, we have to pull back the lens and look at the sheer, unadulterated passion that fuels this sport in the Philippines. Basketball is not just a game for us. It is a religion, a universal language, a cultural cornerstone that binds over 100 million people together across thousands of islands. From the improvised hoops nailed to coconut trees in the provinces to the gleaming, sold-out arenas in the heart of the metropolis, the sound of a bouncing ball is the rhythmic heartbeat of the nation. And when Gilas Pilipinas takes the floor, they carry the weight, the hopes, and the fiercely proud expectations of every single Filipino watching. But for all our heart, for all our undeniable puso, for all the quickness of our guards and the relentless hustle of our undersized forwards, we have continuously run into a brutal, undeniable wall on the international stage. The modern game of basketball, especially under the unforgiving rules and physical demands of FIBA, has evolved into a mathematical, highly analytical battle of spacing, geometry, and perimeter efficiency. You cannot simply survive on dribble penetration and mid-range floaters anymore. When you face the towering behemoths of European powerhouses, the athletic marvels of the Americas, or the highly disciplined defensive units of Oceania, the paint becomes a no-fly zone. Opposing defenses pack the middle, daring us to beat them from the outside. And time again, we have seen our offensive engine stall, our drives thwarted, and our hopes dashed because we simply could not consistently knock down the perimeter shot when it mattered most. We have relied on the sheer individual brilliance of a few streaky shooters, but the lack of a consistent, lethal, high-volume marksman who demands absolute respect from the defense has been our glaring Achilles heel. Finding that definitive answer, that pure, unadulterated sniper who can stretch the floor, command defensive gravity, and open up the driving lanes for our dynamic playmakers, has been the holy grail of Philippine basketball management. And today, we are going to dissect the news that this ultimate puzzle piece, this critical missing link, has finally been identified and secured, potentially changing the entire tactical landscape for Gilas Pilipinas moving forward. But while the national team's perimeter woes are a massive story, they are intrinsically linked to the parallel, ongoing, and heavily scrutinized saga of the man in the middle, the towering symbol of our international aspirations, Kai Sotto. The journey of Kai has been nothing short of a roller coaster, a highly public, heavily debated odyssey that has taken him from the high school gymnasiums of the Philippines to the elite developmental programs in the United States, to the fiercely competitive professional ranks of the Australian NBL, and into the fast-paced, highly tactical environment of the Japanese B-League. Every single step, every single minute on the floor, every missed rotation, and every thunderous dunk has been dissected by millions. The pressure on this young man's shoulders is truly astronomical, a burden that few athletes in the history of the sport have had to carry at such a young age. We all want him to succeed. We all want him to be the first homegrown Filipino to hear his name called in the NBA draft or to step onto an NBA court and prove that our basketball DNA belongs at the absolute pinnacle of the sport. But desire and reality are often separated by a massive, unforgiving chasm of physical limits, tactical nuances, and sheer, uncompromising development. This is where the shocking, blunt, and incredibly vital advice from a highly placed U.S. NCAA team director comes into play. The American collegiate system, particularly at the highest Division I level, is a ruthless, highly efficient factory for producing NBA-ready talent. The directors, scouts, and coaches in this ecosystem see thousands of prospects. They know exactly what translates to the next level, and more importantly, they know exactly what gets a player exposed, exploited, and ultimately left behind. For an NCAA director to publicly weigh in on Kai Sotto's trajectory is not just a passing comment. It is a high-level scouting masterclass. It is a sobering reality check that cuts through the fanboy hype, the social media highlight reels, and the echo chamber of blind optimism. We are going to break down every single syllable of this advice, analyzing what it means for Kai's strength and conditioning, his processing speed, his defensive lateral quickness, and his overall understanding of the modern big man's role in a positionless pace-and-space era. This is the kind of brutal honesty that is absolutely necessary for growth, and we are not going to shy away from exploring the uncomfortable truths it presents. And finally, how do we synthesize the need for national team success with the individual developmental requirements of our most important prospect? This brings us to the crucial third act of our massive deep dive today, the definitive breakdown of the 3 specific professional leagues that have been identified as the absolute best environments for Kai Sotto's critical next phase. The basketball world is vast, and not all leagues are created equal. Some leagues prioritize winning at all costs, leaning heavily on veteran imports and offering very little room for a young, developing big man to make mistakes. Other leagues are highly tactical, emphasizing ball movement, high basketball IQ, and flawless rotational defense. Still, others are built on sheer athleticism, isolation scoring, and raw physical dominance. Choosing the right environment is no longer just about getting a paycheck or securing playing time. It is a highly strategic, incredibly delicate decision that will permanently dictate the ceiling of Kai Sotto's career. Will it be the continuous, fast-paced refinement of the Asian leagues, the bruising, highly physical proving ground of Oceania, or the incredibly tactical, high-pressure crucible of the European market? We are going to dissect the pros, the cons, the cultural fits, the developmental track records, and the true, unvarnished NBA scouting visibility of these 3 specific leagues. We are going to map out exactly what Kai needs to achieve in these environments, not just to survive, but to absolutely dominate and force the hand of NBA front offices. This is not a time for casual fandom. This is a time for deep, analytical, and highly critical observation. The stakes have literally never been higher. The window of opportunity in professional basketball is incredibly small, and the margin for error is virtually non-existent. So, grab a drink, settle in, and prepare for the most comprehensive, detailed, and unfiltered breakdown you will find anywhere on the internet. We are leaving no stone unturned, no angle unexplored, and no tough question unasked. This is the ultimate, definitive analysis of the new Gilas shooter, the brutal truth from the American collegiate system, and the 3-league roadmap for Kai Sotto. Let us transition right now into the deep dive and unpack the reality of Philippine basketball's future. Let us begin this extensive deep dive by immediately addressing the first major component of this breaking news cycle, the definitive answer to the additional Gilas Pilipinas shooter. To comprehend the magnitude of this development, we must first engage in a rigorous, deeply technical analysis of why this specific role has been the most agonizing, glaring deficiency for the Philippine national team over the past decade. If you study the historical tape of Gilas Pilipinas in major international competitions, whether it be the FIBA World Cup, the Olympic qualifying tournaments, or the fiercely contested FIBA Asia Cups, a distinct, highly predictable, and ultimately fatal pattern emerges in our offensive execution. The Philippine basketball DNA is inherently built on the brilliance of our guards. We produce phenomenal ball handlers, lightning-quick slashers, and highly creative playmakers who can break down primary defenders with elite crossover moves and sheer speed. Our offensive system historically relies heavily on dribble penetration, the high pick-and-roll, and the ability to force the defense into compromising rotations. When our guards attack the paint, the objective is twofold: either finish at the rim or draw the help defense to kick the ball out to an open man on the perimeter. This is the foundational drive-and-kick philosophy that dominates modern basketball. However, a system is only as effective as its ultimate execution point. When that kick-out pass arrives behind the three-point line, the player catching the ball must be a highly efficient, high-volume marksman who can punish the defense instantly. For years, opposing international coaches have scouted us perfectly. They know that while our guards are dynamic, our overall team perimeter shooting has been incredibly inconsistent. Therefore, elite teams from Europe, the Americas, and even top-tier Asian rivals deploy highly disciplined zone defenses or aggressive pack-line man-to-man schemes against us. They deliberately sag off our perimeter players, clogging the driving lanes, taking away the paint, and effectively building a massive human wall in front of the basket. They look at our guards and essentially say, "We will not let you get to the rim. We dare you to beat us from the outside." And tragically, on the world stage, under the intense pressure of the shot clock and the blinding lights of the arena, we have consistently failed to make them pay for this disrespect. We have seen games where our three-point shooting percentage plummets into the low 20s, resulting in stagnant, predictable, and heavily contested offensive possessions. The acquisition and integration of a dedicated, elite-level additional shooter fundamentally shatters this opposing defensive strategy. We are not just talking about a player who can occasionally hit an open shot. We are talking about a true specialist, a player whose entire gravitational pull on the court alters the spacing geometry. When you introduce a lethal shooter into the Gilas lineup, a player possessing a lightning-fast release, deep limitless range, and the ability to hit shots off screens, off handoffs, and in catch-and-shoot situations, the defense is forced into an impossible dilemma. They can no longer afford to aggressively help off the perimeter to stop the penetration of our guards. If they sag into the paint, the ball is swung to the shooter, resulting in an automatic 3 points. If they stay glued to the shooter, the driving lanes suddenly part like the Red Sea, allowing our playmakers to attack the rim without facing a forest of towering defenders. This single addition breathes incredible life into the entire offensive ecosystem. It makes the pick-and-roll exponentially more dangerous. It allows our big men more room to operate in the post without constant double teams. It is the ultimate unlock code for the Gilas Pilipinas offense. This answer to our shooting woes requires a specific physical and psychological profile. This cannot simply be an undersized guard who shoots well. On the international stage, undersized shooters are easily contested and often targeted mercilessly on the defensive end. The ideal answer, the one being discussed in the highest echelons of Gilas management, is a tall wing, a player standing between 6'4" and 6'6", who possesses the length to shoot over closing defenders and the defensive fortitude to hold their own against international small forwards. Psychologically, this player must possess the ultimate short memory. A true international sniper cannot hesitate. They cannot let a missed shot dictate the confidence of their next attempt. They must possess a cold, calculating, almost robotic commitment to taking the shot when the offense creates the advantage. The integration of this specific piece elevates Gilas from a team that hopes to compete to a team that dictates the terms of engagement. It shifts our identity from being reactive to being highly proactive and dangerous from all 5 positions on the floor. This brings us to the third, deeply analytical phase of our breakdown, evaluating the 3 specific professional leagues that have been identified as the crucial arenas for Kai Sotto's immediate future. The roadmap to the NBA is not a singular, clearly defined highway. It is a complex, heavily fragmented network of international leagues, each offering a distinct style of play, a different developmental philosophy, and a vastly different level of exposure to NBA front offices. The decision of where to play is not simply a matter of geography or contract size. It is a highly strategic, immensely critical choice that will dictate the environment in which Kai will either forge his weaknesses into strengths or have those weaknesses exposed and compounded. The first league, consistently heavily debated in these circles, is the Japanese B-League. This is a league that has seen a massive, highly calculated infusion of capital, talent, and organizational structure over the past few years, rapidly ascending to become one of the premier basketball destinations in Asia. For a player like Kai Sotto, the B-League offers a deeply fascinating, highly specific set of developmental advantages and corresponding challenges. The style of play in Japan is incredibly fast-paced, highly structured, and deeply reliant on constant ball movement, rapid actions, and high IQ execution. It is not a league dominated by isolation basketball or sheer, overwhelming physical force in the way some Western leagues are. For Kai, playing in this environment forces him to process the game at an incredibly high speed. It demands that he constantly run the floor, make instantaneous decisions on dribble handoffs, and execute highly precise screens and offensive actions. Furthermore, the B.League's rules regarding foreign imports mean that Kai is constantly matching up against high-level, highly experienced American and European big men who have often played in the NBA or top-tier European competitions. This provides a nightly rigorous testing ground for his interior defense and rebounding against physically mature, highly skilled professionals. However, the critical analytical question regarding the B-League is whether it provides the absolute highest level of sheer, unadulterated physicality and the specific type of isolation defensive scenarios that NBA scouts prioritize. While the B-League refines IQ and offensive flow, some evaluators argue it might not fully prepare a prospect for the absolute brutal, bruising trenches of the NBA paint or the highly isolated, switch-heavy defensive schemes prevalent in North America. This seamlessly transitions us to the second highly scrutinized option, the Australian National Basketball League, or the NBL. The NBL has meticulously built a global reputation over the past decade as one of the toughest, most physically demanding, and highly respected professional leagues outside of the NBA. It is an environment characterized by heavy contact, incredibly aggressive defense, a highly physical style of play that is often described as bordering on rugby-like in the paint, and a deeply ingrained culture of hard-nosed, highly competitive basketball. For a developing big man, the NBL is the ultimate crucible. It is a trial by absolute fire. If the primary criticism of Kai Sotto from the US NCAA director centers around his need to develop functional strength, absorb heavy contact, and command his space, then the NBL is theoretically the absolute perfect, though highly unforgiving, laboratory for that specific development. You cannot survive in the NBL if you are easily pushed off your spot, if you hesitate on screens, or if you shy away from physical confrontation under the rim. The league forces a young player to rapidly mature physically and mentally. Furthermore, the NBL has established the highly successful Next Stars program, a dedicated pathway designed specifically to showcase elite international prospects to NBA scouts. NBA front offices highly respect the NBL. They know that if a young player can produce and hold his own in the Australian League, those skills are highly likely to translate directly to the NBA environment. The challenge, however, is immense. The NBL is deeply focused on winning. Coaches are under immense pressure, and they rarely have the luxury of sacrificing team success for the sake of developing a young prospect who is struggling to adapt to the physicality. If a player cannot immediately contribute to winning basketball, their minutes will heavily fluctuate, potentially hindering their rhythm and confidence. It is a high-risk, incredibly high-reward environment. The third league that is often introduced into this highly complex equation is the European model, specifically the top-tier leagues like the Spanish Liga ACB, or even the highly competitive environment of the NBA G League in the United States. Let us break down the European pathway first. European basketball is the pinnacle of tactical execution, deeply ingrained team fundamentals, and incredibly high basketball IQ. In leagues like the ACB or the EuroLeague, every single possession is highly valued, mistakes are punished mercilessly, and the defensive schemes are incredibly sophisticated. For a big man, playing in Europe demands an absolute mastery of pick-and-roll defense, elite rotational awareness, and the ability to operate as a highly efficient hub of ball movement within complex offensive systems. It is an environment that brutally exposes players who rely solely on raw talent and lack a deep understanding of team concepts. NBA scouts revere European prospects because they arrive heavily polished, deeply disciplined, and highly coachable. However, breaking into a top-level European rotation as a young, developing player is extraordinarily difficult. European coaches heavily favor experienced, highly proven veterans, and the developmental leash for mistakes is incredibly short. Conversely, the NBA G League presents a vastly different, deeply contrasting environment. The G League is the direct, highly visible minor league system of the NBA. It is played utilizing NBA rules, an NBA-style three-point line, and a deeply ingrained focus on NBA-style play, meaning heavy pick-and-roll, high reliance on isolation scoring, an extremely fast pace, and an immense focus on sheer explosive athletic ability. The massive advantage of the G League is absolute, undeniable proximity. You are playing directly in front of NBA scouts, general managers, and coaching staffs every single night. The style of play is exactly what you will be asked to do at the next level. However, the deeply critical downside of the G League is that it is often described as a chaotic, highly individualistic environment. Every single player on the floor is desperately fighting for a call-up, trying to showcase their individual skills, which can sometimes lead to a lack of cohesive team basketball. For a young, developing big man who desperately needs structured touches, high-level coaching, and a system that prioritizes his physical and tactical development rather than just individual showcase opportunities, the G League can sometimes be a highly volatile and challenging environment to truly refine the nuances of the game. Ultimately, the analysis of these three league pathways perfectly encapsulates the incredibly complex, highly stressful, and deeply fascinating puzzle that is Kai Sotto's career trajectory. There is no single, magically correct answer. Every single pathway offers distinct, highly valuable developmental tools, and every single pathway presents immense, highly dangerous pitfalls. The Japanese B-League offers high-speed processing, immense offensive touches, and massive cultural support, but perhaps lacks the sheer, bruising physicality required for the ultimate leap. The Australian NBL provides the ultimate, unforgiving physical crucible and massive NBA scouting respect, but carries the deep risk of buried minutes and a harsh win-now reality that can stifle a developing player. The European leagues offer absolute tactical mastery and immense discipline, but are incredibly difficult to break into, while the G League provides ultimate NBA proximity but can degenerate into a chaotic, highly individualistic showcase. The deeply critical reality, integrating the advice of the NCAA evaluators, is that wherever Kai Sotto steps onto the floor, the fundamental requirements remain exactly the same. He must deeply internalize the absolute necessity of functional strength. He must obsessively work on his lateral mobility and defensive processing speed. He must cultivate a highly aggressive, deeply confident perimeter shot. The environment is crucial, but ultimately, the internal engine, the sheer, unyielding desire to embrace the brutal, unseen grind of physical and mental development, will be the sole determining factor. The Philippine nation watches, the global scouts analyze, and the immense pressure continues to mount. This is the reality of the modern basketball prospect. It is not just about height, and it is not just about talent. It is about highly strategic decision-making, relentless adaptation, and the absolute refusal to settle for simply being good enough when greatness is the ultimate, required standard. Moving forward into the second massive pillar of today's analysis, we must confront the sobering, heavily weighted, and incredibly necessary reality check delivered by the US NCAA team director regarding the development of Kai Sotto. To truly appreciate the weight of this advice, you must understand the sheer pedigree and the ruthless evaluation standards of the American collegiate system. NCAA Division I basketball, particularly at the high major level, is not merely a developmental league. It is a high-stakes, billion-dollar industry that serves as the primary, most heavily scrutinized pipeline to the National Basketball Association. The directors, head coaches, and elite scouts operating within this sphere evaluate prospects with a level of microscopic detail that is almost impossible for a casual observer to comprehend. They are not looking at highlight reels of spectacular dunks or flashy passes. They are analyzing biomechanics, processing speed, lateral mobility, core strength, and the highly complex ability to read, react, and execute within deeply intricate offensive and defensive schemes. When an NCAA team director offers specific advice to a prospect like Kai Sotto, it is the equivalent of a master surgeon diagnosing a complex ailment. It cuts directly to the bone. The consensus advice streaming out of the elite American evaluation circles regarding Kai centers heavily on the brutal, uncompromising realities of the modern NBA center position. The days of the slow, plodding, back-to-the-basket giant who merely occupies the paint and waits for the ball are completely, unequivocally dead. The modern game is defined by pace, space, extreme versatility, and the ability to operate effectively on the perimeter on both ends of the floor. The primary directive, the loudest piece of advice emanating from the U.S. evaluators, focuses relentlessly on Kai Sotto's functional strength and explosive athleticism. While Kai possesses incredible natural length and highly impressive offensive touch for a player of his immense stature, the highest levels of basketball require a foundation of core stability and lower body power that allows a big man to hold his ground, absorb heavy contact, and quickly elevate in tight, highly contested spaces. Evaluators look at Kai and see a player who can still be moved off his spot by lower, more compact, and physically imposing frontcourt players. The advice is not simply to lift more weights and become a bulky bodybuilder. That would actually hinder his mobility. The deeply specific, scientific advice is to develop highly functional, basketball-specific strength. This means building a core that acts as an immovable anchor, strengthening the hips and glutes to improve his drop-step explosiveness, and developing the fast-twitch muscle fibers required to contest shots as a primary rim protector without fouling. If Kai cannot command his physical space in the paint against grown, highly conditioned professional athletes, his elite skill set becomes marginalized because he will constantly be playing off balance and out of position. The second, arguably more critical piece of advice from the NCAA perspective, zeroes in on Kai's defensive processing speed and his lateral mobility in pick-and-roll coverages. In the modern game, the pick-and-roll is not just a play. It is the absolute foundation of every single offensive possession. When a 7'3" center is pulled out onto the perimeter to defend a screen set for a lightning-fast, highly skilled guard, he is immediately placed on an island. The American evaluators are analyzing how quickly Kai recognizes the angle of the screen, how rapidly his feet adjust to contain the ball handler, and how efficiently he can recover back to his own man or protect the rim. This requires immense, incredibly difficult lateral quickness for a man of his size. The harsh reality pointed out by scouts is that if a big man cannot survive in space, if he becomes a target for isolation plays by opposing guards who continuously exploit his heavy feet or slow rotational reads, he will literally be played off the floor, regardless of how many points he can score on the other end. The NCAA director's advice is a clarion call. Kai must dedicate an obsessive amount of time to agility drills, defensive stance work, and the cerebral, highly anticipatory aspects of team defense. He must learn to use his incredible wingspan not just to block shots at the rim, but to close passing lanes, corral ball handlers on the perimeter, and execute flawless drop coverages and aggressive hedges without compromising the entire defensive structure behind him. Finally, the collegiate evaluation circles emphasize the absolute necessity of a highly consistent, aggressively confident three-point shot for a modern big man. We discussed the need for a Gilas shooter earlier, but the ultimate weapon in today's basketball is the stretch five. If Kai Sotto can consistently and confidently hit the trail three-pointer in transition and execute the pick and pop from beyond the arc with lethal accuracy, he entirely changes the defensive math for any team he plays on. The advice here is not just about form or mechanics, which Kai fundamentally possesses, but about shot preparation, shot speed, and the undeniable aggressive mentality to take that shot without a fraction of hesitation. American scouts want to see a big man who demands the ball on the perimeter and punishes the defense every single time they sag off him. They want to see a player who does not just settle for the outside shot because he is avoiding contact inside, but who uses the threat of his shot to set up aggressive straight-line drives and incredibly effective pump-fake-and-go maneuvers. As we finally draw this incredibly deep, highly exhaustive analysis to a close, it is absolutely vital to take a step back, take a deep breath, and look at the massive, sweeping landscape we have just meticulously covered. We have completely deconstructed the incredibly urgent, mathematically undeniable necessity of a true, elite-level sniper for Gilas Pilipinas, a singular addition that possesses the immense power to completely restructure the geometry of the court, shatter opposing international defenses, and finally, emphatically unlock the full, devastating potential of our deeply embedded, highly dynamic, guard-oriented system. We have stared directly into the harsh, unvarnished, and incredibly valuable truth delivered by the elite echelons of the American collegiate scouting system, acknowledging that the path to true global dominance for Kai Sotto requires a brutal, uncompromising commitment to highly functional physical strength, lightning-fast defensive processing, and an aggressive, modern offensive mindset. And perhaps most importantly, we have navigated the incredibly complex, highly treacherous labyrinth of professional global basketball leagues, deeply analyzing the B-League, the NBL, and the fiercely competitive Western environments, understanding that the choice of where a prospect chooses to wage their developmental battles is just as critical, just as highly scrutinized, as the sheer talent they possess. This entire conversation, this massive breakdown, is the absolute epitome of why we love this game so fiercely, so deeply, and with such uncompromising passion in the Philippines. We analyze every single detail, we debate every single possession, and we track every single movement of our stars across the globe because their journey is intrinsically, undeniably woven into our national identity. When Gilas steps onto the floor, when Kai Sotto blocks a shot or knocks down a massive three-pointer on foreign soil, it resonates deeply within the millions of fans who view basketball not just as a sport, but as a deeply held point of absolute national pride. But with this immense passion comes the absolute necessity for deep, calculated, and sometimes deeply uncomfortable patience. The arc of a basketball career, especially one carrying the unprecedented, astronomical weight of an entire nation's hopes, is incredibly long. Development is never linear. It is fraught with immense setbacks, highly scrutinized mistakes, brutal physical challenges, and moments of deep, agonizing doubt. The true test for Kai Sotto, the true test for Gilas Pilipinas, and frankly, the ultimate test for us as a deeply invested, incredibly passionate fanbase, is the ability to endure the difficult process, to understand the deeply complex nuances of elite-level evaluation, and to remain highly supportive while maintaining a deeply critical, highly objective analytical eye. The future of Philippine basketball is currently standing at an incredible, highly unprecedented crossroads. The pieces are slowly but surely being identified. The harsh, incredibly necessary realities of the modern global game are being fiercely absorbed. The tactical roadmap is currently being drawn, erased, and aggressively redrawn under the incredibly bright lights of the global stage. What happens next, in the massive, looming international tournaments, in the critical decisions made in the boardrooms, and in the quiet, unseen, incredibly grueling hours spent in the weight rooms and empty gymnasiums around the world, will fundamentally dictate the next decade of our basketball history. I want to hear from every single one of you down in the comments section below. This channel relies entirely on your deep, highly engaged, and fiercely passionate perspectives. Do you believe the addition of a definitive, highly specialized shooter is the absolute, ultimate key to unlocking Gilas's international success? How do you deeply interpret the blunt, highly critical advice from the American collegiate system regarding Sotto's physical and mental development? And when you look closely at the global landscape, which of the highly competitive professional leagues do you firmly believe offers the absolute best, most optimal crucible for his ultimate journey to the absolute highest levels of the sport? Please make sure you absolutely hit that like button to push this deep dive analysis out to the wider basketball community. Ensure you are highly subscribed to the channel with those notifications turned firmly on, because as this incredible, highly complex saga continues to rapidly unfold, as the massive news breaks, and as the future of Philippine basketball continues to aggressively evolve, we will be right here, breaking down every single detail, leaving no stone unturned, and providing the absolute most comprehensive, deeply analytical, and fiercely passionate coverage you will find anywhere. Thank you incredibly much for watching, for your deep attention, and for your unwavering passion for the game. I will see all of you in the absolute next deep dive.